Sound of Freedom is already on its third week at this time of filming, yet cinemas are still getting fully packed on a Friday night, and I had a hard time getting good seats for 2 people. Good thing is, I got lucky, and so I was able to see it. Now, let me just tell you guys though, this movie is not for the faint of heart. It's based on an incredible true story of a former government agent turned vigilante who embarks on a dangerous mission to rescue hundreds of children from human traffickers. In this episode, I'll be giving you my own thoughts on the movie and my personal takeaways from watching, along with biblical references. If you're up for that, then stay tuned. Hello friends and family. If it's our first time meeting, I'm Hannah. And I'll be honest, initially I did not have plans of watching this movie. I didn't really feel the need to watch it. But I've been hearing on social media and also mainstream media that this movie has been getting a lot of heat. When the mainstream media reacts and overreacts in a certain way, that just means that there's something to it. And so I watched. For a movie that had a budget of $14.5 million, now it has passed $100 million in the box office. And it's in the top 20 biggest releases of the year. Who would have thought, right? As for my thoughts, great casting. Jim Caviezel has done so well as Jesus in The Passion of the Christ. And he did it again in this one. The expression in his eyes were intense. Even the child actors were really good. I love that there weren't any exaggerated action sequences, which a lot of American movies tend to have. But let me tell you though, even if this was based on a true story, not all the specific details in the movie were accurate. There was no fraudulent modeling agency in real life. These operations were actually well planned. There was always a team involved in this, and they had all the technology to help them do their jobs effectively. Another thing is that in the movie, it focused more on children. There were also adults involved in the operations. Some things were changed to fit the movie format, but the essence of the movie was true. The intention is to open the minds of the viewers to this criminal industry that many of us are so unaware of, or we're just not aware of the degree of how much it's going on currently in the world. Overall, I think that it was a great movie. So here are my takeaways. Number 1 is to support causes and films like this. In the Bible, we know that Paul was someone who did his ministry full time, and we would be wondering, how was he able to do that? The church that helped him out very much in his ministry is the Philippian church. You can find that in Philippians 4 verses 10 to 20. I'll be reading part of it, so here we go. In verse 14 it says, "Yet it was good of you to share in my troubles. Moreover, as you Philippians know, in the early days of your acquaintance with the gospel, when I set out from Macedonia, not one church shared with me in the matter of giving and receiving except you only. Even when I was in Thessalonica, you sent me aid more than once when I was in need. I have received full payment and have more than enough. I am amply supplied now that I have received from Epaphroditus the gifts you sent. They are a fragrant offering, an acceptable sacrifice, pleasing to God." So we see here that Paul did not do this all by himself. There was a church that supported him in his ministry. And that's the same that we can do for causes and films like this. Tim Ballard's organization may not directly be a ministry in a church, but supporting it along with other organizations like this helps them continue rescuing victims and makes us a partner in promoting good. My next takeaway is this: know what's happening in the world. Don't be isolated. Don't be ignorant. This movie revealed the evils of human trafficking. It's a $150 billion business, and they earn that per year. Per year. 2 million children are trafficked worldwide. And guess what? Do you know who the biggest consumer and producer is of child abuse content? The USA. This movie has actually opened my eyes to how real it is and how big this industry is. I totally understand. Watching the news can be very stressful and sometimes it can be very energy sucking. But if we don't know what's happening in the world, how could we be a salt and light? Matthew 5 verses 13 to 16 says this: "You are the salt and light of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. For us to make an impact in our surroundings, we have to know what's happening. And yes, there has to be a balance so that we can keep our minds sane. Of course, we should start with God's truth first and let that guard our minds. But also with the right sources, we can know what's going on in the world. And another thing to note is that we know that the Lord is in control. The Lord can use us, but in the end, we know that the Lord is going to restore everything back. While we're here on earth, let's be effective as Christians. My next takeaway is this: do what God has called you to do. As a parent or an auntie, an uncle, protect our children. There are just so many crazy things that are out there in schools influencing the children. They don't know what's right or wrong yet. And that's where we come in. As an employee, do your job well as a good Christian. And some of you might actually be called to directly be involved in solving crimes, in saving children or saving victims of abuse. Know that God is with you. 1 Corinthians 7:17 says, "Nevertheless, each person should live as a believer in whatever situation the Lord has assigned to them, just as God has called them." And there are a lot of verses that would remind us about doing good. Isaiah 1:17, "Learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed, take up the cause of the fatherless, plead the case of the widow." Proverbs 31 verses 8 and 9, "Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and needy." There are so many verses that you can check out for that. My next takeaway is this: don't undermine your own actions. After I watched this movie and I was so moved by it, my next step was, what can I do? I may not be someone who is called to be directly involved in solving the crimes or catching the bad guys. Maybe you're not called either, but everyone has their own role. You can help spread awareness among people. You could help by praying for the people that are directly involved. You can pray for the government, the pastors, anyone who comes to mind. 1 Corinthians 12 verses 14 and 26 says this: "Even so, the body is not made up of one part, but of many." Verse 26 says, "If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it." This mission of helping to minimize evil in the world is not just a one-person effort. There are a lot of people involved in it, and there are different roles. So whatever your role is, don't undermine it. The next one is to have a support system or accountability. For us to fulfill our callings, we need to have people alongside us. As I mentioned earlier, in the real story, Tim Ballard was in a big team of people. He was working with the CIA and a lot of other people to help arrest the bad guys. But when I watched an interview with Tim Ballard himself, one thing that I noticed that he said was that the major reason why he was doing what he was doing was his wife. In the real story, Tim Ballard was told by his wife, "Quit your job and go rescue these kids." And what a support system she was, even where we are now, wherever we are now. As Christians who want to practice our faith, we are going to experience persecution. Jesus himself did when he was on earth. And it's going to be very tiring. You might feel burned out, but when we have the support of each other among the body of Christ, we can stay faithful. In Ecclesiastes 4 verse 9, it says, "Two are better than one, because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other. But pity anyone who falls and no one to help them up." And the verses go on to talk about how important it is to have a support system. In this world, there are just so many evils that we face, and it may be overwhelming, especially after watching this movie. But we do what we can to help do good. And with that, if you have not watched this movie yet on the big screen, go watch it. What are you waiting for? I also have a video about a Christian perspective on environmentalism. You can check that right here. Or maybe you would like this one over here. If this has helped you or you were blessed by it, go ahead and smash that like button. If you like more content like this, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Our hope and future is in Jesus. I'll see you in the next video.